I'd like to open up then the panel for questions. And if anyone has a question, just please stand up, state the question, and for the sake of those who are looking at this remotely, we're going to have the speaker then repeat the question and then answer it. And the whole panel can pitch in on that. So, yes.
Two of the panelists mentioned blooms for the first time in bodies of water. Where we live, one large pond, 1,500 acres, is kept as the reservoir for the city of Fall River, and it's pristine.
Mm-hmm.
A 7-iron way is a pond we use for recreation, or have been using, and that's how much we can do that for. What do we know about transference? If a bird is swimming in the south pond, which we know has many blooms, is there a concern if it flies to the northern pond? It doesn't. It can walk. Just about except there's a highway there. How concerned should they be? Because it's something apparently the city's never even considered.
Anyone want to?
Yeah. So the question was about a bloom in adjacent lakes if it's transferable by wildlife. So that's a concern, but I would think it depends how they're hydrologically connected, and also whether or not. So there's already cyanobacteria in the one that's not blooming. So the big issue is that what is the the nutrient levels, the temperature regime, the depth, all of those things will affect the bloom. So if you have one that's being well managed and is not getting a lot of nutrient inputs, and one that is, even though they're right next to each other and have the same organisms, the one will show the cyanobacteria blooms and the other one may not. So we'd have to really look at it, specifically. I don't know if
it would be a high level of concern.
Right.
It's already there, as long as the conditions around the other pond. It was originally one pond and then cut in half.
Okay.
And water does pass from one to the other. It doesn't go upstream, it goes down. But that's not a concern that you would focus on.
Yeah, it's not like an invasive keep it out kind of problem as much, especially if they were one pond in the past. They most likely have, similar communities, but it depends on the balance of the community is really what sets off the blooms.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, any other questions here? Yes. Please.
This question specifically for Kristin. Do you drill through the ice and sample water in the winter?
We try to go out maybe once a winter. It depends on the ice situation, obviously. Some years, like right this year, it's not so stable that we could do that, but we have done it in the past. We haven't seen really any issue or thing of concern, but it's mostly like if we do get out, it's one time a year. So, yeah.
Yes.
So I was wondering how each of your groups are communicating this with a variety of different stakeholders. So a lot of management decisions get made on a season-by-season basis. Monitoring gets done almost on a season-by-season basis. So I was just wondering how you go about taking all that information that you collect, communicating it to stakeholder groups that just wants to go swimming.
So the question is, how does this information collected by each of these groups get disseminated to other groups? Anyone want to take that?
I'll start, I guess. I think that's one of the reasons the CMC came into existence. As originally, we were looking at the cyanobacteria problem that just was emerging in some of the states, and how do we communicate with that with a whole different variety of stakeholders? And I think some of the things that have come up from this collaborative is that we are able to connect different people with different backgrounds that have different needs and communicate that. We're still working on that. It's a work in progress, developing new tools, different communication pathways, whether it's web pages or Twitter accounts or whatever it happens to be. There's many different ways that we do that at the CMC level.
Yeah. So at the state level, that really depends on the water body. Some of them are being collected by and paid for by the private lake association, and they may not even tell us about it at all. Most of the time, if it's something that we're doing because it's a big issue to the public, they'll be calling us to get the information. So, we would disseminate it that way. A lot of the monitoring data will eventually be available through the EPA WQX shared data portal. But it's, in general, people contact us for data directly. And we're in contact with them if we're working on an issue, at that water body.
We're a little unique being on the local government level, as we own about 8,000 surrounding acres of land in our watersheds. So we don't have necessarily stakeholders out there. We do have some private landowners on the lake. Being local government, any tests that we run are available to the public. We normally, though, concentrate on releasing data about our finished drinking water. We're required to do so. And all those results are online through the state of New Hampshire NHDES website, as well as if anyone ever asks, we would provide them. But I guess we're just a little different in that sense.
Yeah, so on the kind of smaller scale perspective, I think some of the feedback I've gotten from volunteers that do the cyano monitoring is that they might send out, so we'll take samples and then send it out to a lab to get monitoring done, and we'll get back data or numbers that aren't necessarily something that's tangible that the lake associations or groups can really use and give something back to their community or to their stakeholders. We'll get maybe a measure of fluorescence or something like that, and just a regular homeowner or someone that wants to go swimming is going to say, okay, does that mean I can swim today? Does it mean I can't? What about next week? So I think one of the things, that's just sort of our perspective. We don't have a solid form to disseminate the information in sort of a digestible way yet. So I'm kind of hoping that's something that will come out of this collaborative long term.
Okay, thanks. I think that that particular question would warrant a whole session talking about how to better communicate. And I think as our data becomes more relevant, and that's the other thing, is just keep in mind that what we're doing here today represents sort of the beginnings of understanding how to track and how to manage cyanobacteria blooms. And so we're in a really early phase, but now we're beginning to collect data that can be translated into whether it's safe to go swimming. That's, in the end, we have to keep that objective in mind, because that's why a lot of us are doing this work. Yes?
I'm familiar with the guidance in Connecticut, and I think a lot of our states have similar guidance, and there are thresholds where certain threshold, for instance, cells, you're supposed to be contacted, or you're supposed to contact the state. So I guess my question is, are you seeing an increase in the number of times you're contacted, meaning an increase in the number of blooms that are occurring statewide or regionally wide? And do you think that is more related to just a greater awareness of what's going on? Or are you seeing trends with other kinds of variables, climate, nutrient enrichment, those sorts of things?
Okay, so to try to summarize that question, I think he's asking about, when we're getting contacted about either new or existing water bodies that are having cyanobacteria problems, and what could cause those. So some of the ones that have been blooming for a long time, they're still blooming every year. Some of them are being treated so that they don't bloom, but I haven't seen a reduction in them blooming naturally. And we definitely have water bodies that haven't shown traditional blooms before blooming. So it's a slippery slope, but my answer would be, I feel like the changing conditions are causing more places to bloom, whether it's a tipping point of nutrients that has been building up and that would have bloomed even without, the significant change in temperature and less ice cover and stuff that we're seeing in Connecticut. As far as reporting to us, again, the DPH really makes a lot of the decisions, and local health directors are the ones who kind of are in direct contact with the water bodies at, in specific places around the state. If it's significant enough, they'll contact us, but Some of them may decide to, apply for a permit and things like that and not actually come directly to like the monitoring department. So it's kind of a mixed bag, especially like I said, in Connecticut, a lot of the lakes we have almost 4,000 lakes in the state, none as big as the ones in New Hampshire, very few as what New Hampshire people would consider a big recreation lake. And then we have a lot of couple acre lakes. So it kind of has fallen to the people living on the lakes and their lake associations, how they want to manage and work with the town, the health department, and then us. So it's all over the board with that, but we are seeing, like I just said, 2019, we had over 300 contacts, most of them about cyanobacteria. And that was way more, each year has been consistently more through awareness, also changes in temperature and new places blooming.
Okay.
It's a quick question. What treatment methods? Yeah.
And the state isn't treating any lakes.
Okay.
So what's happening is they're getting a consultant and they're getting approval for different types of things. So
From the state.
yeah. So, I mean, they may use copper sulfate because they're looking at a certain problem. It could be weed related, and then it also helps cyanobacteria or makes it worse. So I work in, they basically are looking at water quality, natural condition. The rest of the agency deals more with when they're getting permits and things like that. And then we would just go and monitor the results.
Okay, so I think we have time for one short question. Yes.
I don't know how sure it is, but it's mostly for Kristin. If you get your water for the public system to be effective, do you have any tools for
Out of the water supply, I wish. With it being a lake, it's tough. And like I said, we hadn't really seen anything significant. And I say that because that was kind of coming off the last question. We may have had a bloom like during the night. Blooms can come and go so easily and so quickly that we might have had some little things here or there that no one noticed or we weren't aware of. But in 2017, that's when we did have a significant bloom. So unfortunately, there's no way, like Walter was saying before, the cyanobacteria is already in there and it's just the conditions, and that year we had very high rainfall precipitation, therefore more nutrient loading, and it was just the perfect storm basically. And to also kind of piggyback on the last question, we saw that trend across the region. I've been part of some research studies that we just saw similar timing, like even in different states with similar things. The good thing about the bloom and what we dealt with in 2017 is that we learned that our treatment facility really was the most efficient way of removing the cyano from our treatment plants. We have like basically optimal ways and techniques to remove cyanobacteria. We have physical removal process through flocculation and sedimentation. We also use ozonation. And then, we have deep bed carbon filters. So what we did when we had the bloom was we traced it basically. So we took samples from the source water through every step of the treatment process. And after that first step of flocculation, we didn't see any cells present after that. So that really, made us feel confident about our treatment facility. I know different people have different practices and things, but I wish we could keep it out completely.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the panel for a very interesting